The Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia were covered in a thick, suffocating fog that seemed to swallow the very light of the moon. Perched on a jagged cliffside was the Heights, a world-class private sanatorium and medical research center. Officially, it was a place where wounded veterans and retired high-ranking officials went for advanced recovery. But in the nearby town of Ravens Hollow, people spoke in whispers about the black ambulances that arrived at midnight and the high-pitched hum of machinery that vibrated through the forest floor. Into this cold, sterile world walked a woman named Sarah. She was thin, pale, and moved with a slight limp. She wore a faded gray uniform and spent her nights scrubbing the blood-stained floors of the emergency wing and cleaning the surgical theaters. Her file said she was a Gold Star widow whose husband had died in a botched raid, leaving her a broken woman with no family and nowhere else to go. To the security staff at the Heights, a group of arrogant, high-paid mercenaries led by a man named Commander Jax, Sarah was less than a person. She was a target for their boredom. Jax was a man who lived for cruelty. He took pleasure in tripping Sarah in the hallways, watching her bucket of dirty water spill over her worn-out shoes. He would mock her late husband, telling her that he probably died, crying like a coward, and that Sarah was lucky to even have a job cleaning up after real men. He once made her scrub a 200-foot hallway with a toothbrush just because he didn't like the way she looked at him. Sarah never fought back. She never screamed. She simply looked at the floor, her eyes dull and lifeless, absorbing every insult and every shove like a sponge. Jax and his men laughed, calling her the ghost, convinced she was too shattered to ever stand up for herself. But behind those dull, lifeless eyes, a cold and lethal computer was running at full capacity. Sarah was actually Colonel Sarah Viper Thorne, the former head of a Tier 1 Black Ops medical intelligence unit. She was a woman who was trained to save lives in the middle of a firefight and end them with a single strike to a pressure point. She hadn't lost her husband in a botched raid. He had been murdered by a shadow organization that was now using the Heights as a front for illegal human enhancement and organ harvesting. Sarah wasn't there to clean floors. She was there to perform a surgical strike on the heart of the conspiracy. For 3 months, she had played the role of the broken widow, her limp a calculated deception, while her cleaning supplies were actually sophisticated surveillance tools. She had mapped every vent, every biometric sensor, and every guard rotation in the mountain fortress. The tension reached a boiling point on a freezing Tuesday night. A young soldier, a corporal named Danny who had been brought in for a routine surgery, went missing from his room. Sarah had seen him earlier that day. He was a kind kid from a small town in Ohio, and he reminded her of the young men she used to lead into battle. She found him in Sector 9, a restricted sub-basement that didn't exist on the facility's official blueprints. He was strapped to a cold metal table, surrounded by Dr. Alistair Voss, the facility's lead scientist, and Jax. They were preparing to harvest his bone marrow for an experimental serum. Sarah watched through a hidden camera she had placed in the ventilation shaft, her knuckles turning white. She knew that the moment she acted, her cover was blown, but she also knew she couldn't let another soldier die on her watch. The broken widow mask finally shattered when Jax caught her near the service elevator. He was frustrated because a shipment of chemicals was late, and he decided to take it out on Sarah. He shoved her against the concrete wall, his hand tightening around her throat. He told her that her husband's death was the best thing that ever happened because it brought a useful little slave to the Heights. He raised his hand to strike her, but his hand never landed. In a move so fast the human I couldn't track it, Sarah's hand shot up, catching Jax's wrist. The sound of his radius snapping echoed through the hallway like a dry branch breaking. Sarah didn't flinch. Her limp disappeared, her posture straightened, and the dead look in her eyes was replaced by a fire that made Jax's blood turn to ice. She leaned in close and whispered, "My husband was 10 times the man you'll ever be. And tonight, I'm going to show you what a broken woman can really do." Jax tried to reach for his radio, but Sarah was already a blur of calculated violence. She delivered a palm strike to his solar plexus that collapsed his lungs, then used his own tactical baton to knock him into unconsciousness. She didn't kill him. She wanted him to see his world burn first. She pulled a hidden encrypted comms device from her cleaning belt. Viper to Overlord. The nest is active. Initiating code black. Do not, I repeat, do not leave any survivors. She didn't wait for a response. She moved through the facility with the silence of a mountain lion. The security teams, thinking they were hunting a janitor, were met with a nightmare. Sarah used the environment as her weapon. She bypassed the nitrogen cooling system, filling the hallways with a freezing fog that blinded the guards' thermal goggles while she used her own low-light vision to pick them off. The facility became a slaughterhouse for the mercenaries. Sarah didn't use a gun. She used the very tools of her trade. A floor buffer cord became a garrote. A surgical scalpel became a throwing knife. She moved through the guards with a terrifying efficiency that left them paralyzed with fear. They were shouting into their radios about a ghost in the hallways, a woman who appeared out of the shadows and disappeared before they could even pull the trigger. Dr. Voss, realizing that his security was being dismantled, tried to initiate a self-destruct sequence to hide the evidence. He fled toward the rooftop helipad, clutching a briefcase full of the experimental serum. But the elevator didn't go to the roof. Sarah had rerouted the controls. The elevator doors opened in the middle of the main courtyard, where a team of Sarah's own elite operators, who had been waiting in the woods, were already breaching the walls. Sarah stood in the center of the courtyard, her gray uniform covered in the dust of the mountain. Voss screamed for his men to protect him, but there was no one left. Every guard, every mercenary, and every bully was either unconscious or in zip ties. Jax was dragged out into the snow, his face pale as he saw the broken widow being saluted by a 3-star general. The realization hit him like a freight train. He hadn't been bullying a janitor. He had been poking a sleeping dragon. Sarah walked up to Jax, who was trembling in the dirt. She didn't say a word. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out photograph of her husband. She placed it in front of Jax's face and told him to remember that face, because the man in that photo was the reason he was going to spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison. She then turned to Dr. Voss and told him that his research was now property of the U.S. government and that he would be tried for war crimes. The arrogance that had defined the heights for years evaporated in the cold morning air, replaced by the weight of justice. As the sun began to rise over the Blue Ridge, Sarah watched as the black ambulances were replaced by military transports. The ghost patients were being rescued, and the secrets of the mountain were finally being exposed to the light of day. Sarah's limp didn't return. She stood tall, a warrior who had finally finished her longest mission. She declined the offer of a ride back to D.C., choosing instead to walk down the mountain road. She had a new name, a new identity, and a world of shadows that still needed a nobody to clean them up. To the people she passed on the road, she was just a hiker, another quiet face in the Virginia mist. But in the halls of the Pentagon, they knew the truth. The ghost was still out there, and she was always watching. The legacy of Sarah Viper Thorne became a whisper in every training camp and every barracks. They told the story of the woman who scrubbed floors while planning a revolution. They reminded every new recruit that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the loudest voice or the biggest gun. It's the one who is holding the mop and watching you with silent, steady eyes. The story of the Heights was a warning to the corrupt and a hope for the forgotten. And as Sarah disappeared into the forest, her mission complete, the world felt a little safer, knowing that the broken widow was actually the ultimate guardian. If you found this story of justice and hidden power satisfying, don't let the shadows win. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. We bring you the most intense, underestimated hero stories every week, showing the world that you should never, ever push a nobody too far. Like this video if you want to see Sarah's next mission, and comment below with the word justice if you watched until the very end. Thanks for being part of the journey, and we'll see you in the next shadow.